bob. If it were that wavy thing I did at first, it'd all be flat by now. All right, so load up, please. We got things to learn. Okay. And Ashton, you already got these, yes? Okay, cool. All right, so we are moving on. This is probably one of my favorite sections to talk about, even though I am certainly not an expert in everyday memory. It is kind of one of my favorite things to kind of learn about. So we're talking about everyday memory. This is going to be really good. And I'll probably have time to grade those stories after class. Okay, so here's what we're going to talk about today when we talk about everyday memory. So we're going to talk about some differences in research methods. So the different ways that we do research. Don't worry, if you were thinking, when you hear research methods and you were thinking about scary statistics, don't worry, it's not that type of discussion. When we're talking about the kind of memory studies that I do versus the types of memory studies that are done by people that study everyday memory, we're going to see some differences. So these are the kind of memories that you are most often going to see in your everyday life. So we're going to talk about autobiographical memory. These are the personal memories of your life that fit a life story and a life narrative. We're going to talk about eyewitness testimony and memories for crimes. And then we're going to talk about another type of memory that you may not have heard of before. It is called prospective or prospective memory. So oftentimes when we are talking about memory, we're often talking about retrospective memory. We're talking about things that happened in the past. Prospective memory is remembering to do something in the future. And so we'll talk about what we know about that. So we're going to start by talking about everyday memory research. And I was going to say, I hope you enjoyed this chapter, because after this, we've been going in order by chapter. We're going to start jumping around a bit next. It's going to be fun. And we have a special guest on Friday. Somebody is observing my teaching. Who could it be? It's not, it's faculty.
Oh. The end professors?
It is not. I'm sorry. I did get an offer, but I already had one by then. Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how the research in everyday memory research is different. So first of all, when we think about memories for lists, the kind of studies that I would give you. So here's the list of words. You need to remember them for later. If I compare the memories that you would do in a lot of my research versus the memories that we consider your everyday memories, your autobiographical memories, important stories from your life, they are typically going to be older, and they're also going to be more rehearsed. Like every event often has a really good way of bringing up your life memories. So for example, I can't help but do this because, well, me getting my PhD and getting various degrees has been a big part of my life story. So every time that we have a graduation, I can't help but think about mine a little bit. Also because I have an ego. It's y'all's special day. I try not to make it about me, but you're always going to think a little bit about when it happened to you. On your first day of college, or maybe your last day of college, you might think about your first day at Cottey. How many of you think of your first couple of days at Cottey? Maybe not as much anymore, but you probably think about things that have happened in previous Cottey years every now and again. So your everyday memories are going to be typically older than like lists that you would get in a lab task, because you think about them more, you rehearse them more. So basically what you're dealing with are not memories, but what Cohen referred to back in 2008 are memories of memories. So you're not actually thinking of the event as it actually happened. You have filtered it. You are remembering the filtered memory. So here's a question that I have, because I'm kind of curious. When you think back to memories that have happened to you, raise your hand if you have a first person perspective. So it's like looking out through your own eyes. Okay, how many of you have a third person perspective where it's like you're watching yourself in a movie? If you watch yourself through a third person perspective, that is very clearly a memory of a memory. You have distorted that because none of us can do that unless we have a mirror pointed around us at all times. We're always looking through our own eyes. Unless you are zooming like I am right now, you can't actually see what your face looks like when these things are happening. So if you're looking at it through a third person perspective, you've already distorted it. And as somebody who views almost all of her personal memories through a third person perspective, I am always fascinated by people who can see it through a first person perspective because I never can. So interestingly enough, learning here is often incidental. So another word for incidental is not deliberate. It is not intentional learning. So oftentimes for long-term memory or short-term memory studies, the learning is intentional. We are telling people, hey, learn this list of words. You're going to need it for later. When we're talking about big personal life events, when I went to my PhD graduation, I was not sitting there going, I need to rehearse this. I need to remember this. I'm going to need it later. It just happened. My memory of the event just happened. So the learning is often going to be incidental and not deliberate for everyday memories. And additionally, there are going to be some social factors in play as well. So one of those social factors is that in general, those are going to be more important in everyday memory than in standard memory research. Memories, especially memories of our own lives, are shared. Like, good Lord, y'all, it's not, we're not even like 2/3 of the way through the semester. And how many personal memories have I shared with you? How many personal memories have y'all shared with me? Like when we talk about everyday memories, we have to consider the social component. You're sharing this information with your family, your friends, your relatives. And not to mention, sometimes the goal is to entertain, versus something like standard memory research where I get a list of words to remember. I'm not going to be like, hey, hey friend, here's a list of words that I was told to remember. Like nobody does that, not even me. And I'm a memory geek, y'all. Like we don't have a goal to entertain with standard memory research. We don't have a goal of building connection with standard memory research. Now, that kind of gets to the next thing. When we're talking about memory research in a laboratory, the goal is accuracy, right? Here in everyday memories, the goal is not necessarily to build accuracy. Like I can tell you that I often share events from my life with you, first of all, so that you understand that I'm not this scary person up at the podium that grades you. And that sometimes there are things that I very much relate to you on, and I want to share those with you. And just to kind of build connections and help you learn things. So in everyday memory, the goal may be to build connection or build a friendship or share information or things like that. Okay. Everybody good here? All right. So here's a question. Check it out. It moves. Is there a question or a story that one of you or your family members have told that has become extremely embellished to the point where it's not even accurate anymore? You just tell it for entertainment purposes. Anybody feel like sharing? Ashton, yeah.
One time, I don't know how it actually happened. This is just how my mom tells it. There's one time after my sisters and I watched 101 Dalmatians.
Oh dear.
That my older sister wanted Dalmatian. And so my younger sister and I wanted to play with our older sister. So she got a Sharpie and decided that we were going to be the Dalmatians. My father comes home, see my mother screaming at my older sister Like, what did you do? My younger sister and I sobbing in the bathtub because it wouldn't come off.
Oh,
And we just had giant Sharpie spots all over us.
oh, wow. And you know what happens when it rinses off? It turns purple. So then you look like you're
Oh, yeah.
bruised.
Oh, yeah, I went to school. My mom says that I went to the Ava and I went to school and our teachers were really concerned about us.
Yes, I would assume so. Okay, anybody else? My partner's family has a really good one from when he was a kid where he wanted to play Ninja Turtles. And so he went into the sewer. Like he went into a culvert and just got covered with like the nastiest, stinkiest sewage. They really like to share that one. We talked about it just the other day. Yeah.
My mom always goes, and I have some memory of this one.
Okay.
When I was in like first grade, I had an older sister, and one of her favorite things to do is, for context, have you ever done laundry baskets down the stairs?
Yes.
We had, so stairs, wall stairs, and my older sister was like, let's play Mario Kart.
No.
Because I love her favorite Barbie, so she put me in it, and then she goes, you know what's really interesting? So she switched it out for one of those blue Tupperware bins and put the lid on me and goes, now you're in an actual car, and she did like little push around, and then all of a sudden I heard dunk, 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 dunk. And part of the reason I remember this is when I hit the wall, the box flipped and went down, and I like pushed it open, and that's when I had my turtle cat phase, where I went around believing I was a turtle cat.
Yikes.
My mom always tells it, and I always don't. The only thing I remember is having a box on my back and that I'm a turtle cat.
Okay. So I will share one with me because I shared somebody else's, so I should share one of my own. So I don't exactly know how this happened, but I think it's kind of obvious I'm a pretty wordy person. And when I was very young, I had a very advanced vocabulary for my age. I still do have a pretty advanced vocab, but it was pretty obvious when I was a kid. And so for some reason or other, my mother and my aunt were laughing at me for something that I did or something that I said. And I came out and I was 7 years old and I said something like, "You made me the laughing stock of this entire apartment." So every time that I get together and my mom and my aunt are there, it turns into, let's talk about all the precocious things that she said when she was little. And that's the first one they always go to. Okay, so here's the thing. What you remember in your everyday memories are determined by your goals. So the goals that you have for your everyday memories ultimately affect what you remember from things. So that kind of matters. And generally what we find is that memories can be deliberately distorted, particularly with the purposes of entertainment. So you might change a little detail here or a little detail there to make the narrative cleaner, to make it funnier. You might exaggerate something, you might minimize something to basically make the story so much more interesting. And so Marcin Tversky found that memories can absolutely be distorted, and Dudikovic and colleagues in 2004 did actually report that entertaining often will, when your goal is to entertain, a memory is going to become more distorted. So they basically asked people to read a story and they had them recall it 3 times. And they either had to recall it accurately, like you would in a memory study, or they had to basically tell it for the purposes of entertaining. When your goal is to entertain, the people who had to tell the memory more entertainingly, they made more mistakes in their memories, they made more distortions, and they were more biased. They often are going to be more emotional and they're going to have fewer actual details. So another example of this, this comes from Hellman and colleagues back in 2011. They had to watch a video of a fight in a pub. And basically, there's two men, and then they had to describe that fight to another student. And they had been told, they had basically been told that this particular person was or was not responsible for what happened. So participants would tell somebody, hey, this person was responsible, or hey, this person wasn't responsible. And the participants basically biased their story to reflect what they had been told. So if they were told that person A was responsible for the fight, their retelling of the story reflected that belief. So if they said person A had been to blame, the retelling of the story was told so that it looked like person A was the instigator, even if that's not what the details actually showed. Does that kind of make sense? Okay. So a retelling of a pub brawl basically was biased toward the listener's belief as to who started it. And later recall of this information. So not only was this biasing in the retelling, it was also reflected in later recall of the event. So they were not only asked to retell this information, they also had to recall it. And that biased retelling ended up affecting their memories of the event later on. So when you bias something in some sort of way, it is ultimately going to reflect your memory for that information. The more entertaining that you make a story, the more distortions, and thus the less accurate the memory will become the next time you remember it. Okay, so we're going to start by talking about autobiographical memory. So autobiographical memory are memories that are relating to our personal past and our experiences. So we need to make a distinction between autobiographical memory and standard episodic memory. So write this down. This is important. Not that, please don't write that down. Autobiographical memory is a special type of episodic memory. So autobiographical memory is a type of episodic memory, but what separates autobiographical memory from standard episodic memories, here's an episodic memory. I had cinnamon Pop-Tarts for breakfast this morning. Is that going to be really important for my life story or my narrative? Probably not. On the other hand, my memory of my PhD graduation or the first community play that I was in, those are going to be more important for my life story because they tell you a little bit about who I am. So autobiographical memories are often going to be very complex, and they're going to be more important to us than standard episodic memories. And whereas most of your episodic memories don't really extend back, but for maybe a few days, I'm not going to remember what I had for breakfast today a week from now. I'm just not. It's not important. But your autobiographical memories can extend back years, all the way back to decades. Yes.
So is this why, like, when you see a food that you don't like, but you haven't had it in a while, or like you remember not liking it as a kid, is that why you know you don't like it, or is that like
It's a combination of a couple of things. It's probably taste aversion more than anything else, and that's more of a learning and conditioning phenomenon. Yeah.
So what did you say? Could you repeat it? Autobiographical memories are a special type of
Episodic memories, but they're going to be more complex and they're going to be more important than your standard episodic memories. Like what you had for lunch today counts as an episodic memory. You may not even remember that tomorrow, but you might remember your college graduation for the rest of your life. Yeah.
So would it be more of an autobiographical memory if someone had the same thing for lunch every day?
Yeah, that probably would be if it's an important part of their identity. Like, I don't have a lot of important autobiographical memories about drinking Diet Mountain Dew, but I did dump somebody for giving me an ultimatum about it. So now it's a part of I didn't even really drink that much, even at my worst. He was just a weird guy. But yeah, now it's an autobiographical memory. Don't make a soda your personality trait. Too late. Okay. So how do these differ from episodic memories? So episodic memories are going to be any personal experiences at a specific time or place. So when you're thinking about what you did this weekend, what you learned in class on Friday, those are going to be your personal experiences, and they're going to be trivial most of the time. Your episodic memories are often for trivial things, and they're often only going to extend back minutes to hours, maybe days if you're lucky. Oh, it's still raining and it's not going to get any better. I just want it to stop. I have to walk in it. I have to walk in it pretty regularly, so. But then again, so do y'all, so. You understand. Okay. Everybody good here? Okay. So we're going to talk about two major different types of autobiographical memories. We're going to talk about what are called flashbulb memories, so called because they are so vivid that it looks like you took them with a camera. So very vivid, almost like a photograph. And then we're going to talk about the memories that you have across your life. Now, I understand that compared to me, your lifespan is considerably shorter. Like you've lived a little bit less of your life. And so there's only so much that your memories are going to span, but we can still talk about a lot of these things. Okay, everybody good? So we're going to start by talking about flashbulb memories. So I will tell you, when I first started talking about flashbulb memories here at Cottey, I used a pretty standard example. We talked about September 11th, and I'm going to talk about that today. However, here's what I've discovered, and here's the joy of becoming older. When I first started teaching at Cottey and talking about flashbulb memories, most of my students were like, we were in elementary school. And then it became, we weren't in school yet. And then it became, I wasn't even born then. And now it's like, I can't talk about it anymore because like today's freshmen, like they were born, like, and some of you, like sophomores, you were born when I was graduating high school. So yeah. So I can't really talk about it anymore, but that's okay because I think we found a new flashbulb memory to replace it. And we'll talk about what that is in a minute. So flashbulb memories are vivid, detailed memories of very significant dramatic events. Now, I will mention that flashbulb memories do not necessarily include big things like September 11th in there. They could also be personal memories that are important for your life. But oftentimes, the reason that we talk about big events like September 11th, the death of Princess Diana, the Challenger explosion, is because those are easier to study because so many people went through them at the same time. I can't necessarily talk about your flashbulb memory for your wedding, for example, because A, not everybody gets married B, not everybody was invited to your wedding, so we don't all have memories of your wedding, but many, many people have memories of September 11th or the JFK assassination or things like that. So when we study flashbulb memories, we're often going to be talking about these big emotional events that are embedded in either our national consciousness or our global consciousness. So we're talking about very vivid, detailed memories. They are often going to be unexpected. And because they are unexpected, Brown and Kulik back in 1977 believed that they print permanent details in our memory system. So to kind of put this into perspective, I was a freshman in college when September 11th happened. I had only been at school for 2 weeks. And to put this into perspective, I recognize that since y'all have been, since y'all were old enough, we've always been at war with another country. We were in Iraq for a very long time. We were in Afghanistan for a very long time until very recently. But generally, we had not been at war for a while. And we certainly hadn't had something of this nature happen on our turf in a very long time. And so, yeah, there were some other things going on. My dad went to Bosnia as part of a mission, and that was very grim and things like that. We were still doing stuff, but when you're 18 years old, you're like, we're at peace, because you don't really understand that much about global relations because, well, you grow up in a tiny little sheltered hometown. So then you go to college, you're already learning all this stuff, and then this just shatters your worldview right open in a way that very few other things do. So, yeah. Okay, so what sort of information is often going to be included in a flashbulb memory? So first, you're going to have an informant. This is going to be a person who supplied you with the information. Was it somebody on the TV? Was it somebody on your phone? Did somebody text you? You're going to have the place that you heard the news. You're going to be talking about the things that are going on at the moment that you heard this. So the ongoing event, you're noting the emotional state of yourself and other people, and you're talking about the consequences of the said event. So let's take an application, and then I'm going to talk about what I think is our new candidate for a flashbulb memory after I share my information. Yeah. What do you think it is? It is COVID. What specific date for COVID? March 2020. March 2020. Yep. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay. So that now the exact specific dates, but it was that 1 week in March for basically everybody. So yeah, I first started. Now I'm going to be completely honest with you. And I know that some of you will not appreciate this because you weren't around at the time. I had been freaking out about COVID since January. And so I was walking around with this big bottle of hand sanitizer, like the week before classes started, like the week before we broke for spring break. I was very scared. I actually became less scared as time went on, just because I was learning how to roll with it. But my job at some point was to basically soothe all of the other people who had panicked because I panicked first. But I remember it just all kind of like it was just kind of like dominoes collapsing one by one. So first people, they couldn't do the Poland trip for students, which was the faculty-led trip. Then we started getting murmurs about the Germany trip, and then the Germany trip got canceled. hey, they did those students a service. They would have been trapped there, like if they had been there even a couple of days later. And so then we break for spring break. We thought we were gonna come back. And then within that first week, Wednesday is basically when of that first week of spring break was when everything fell apart. So I'm at MU, I'm at the University of Missouri meeting with people. One of my sabbatical advisors gave me a hug and I thought I had killed him that I was going to kill him driving on the way home because he hugged me. I was like, oh gosh, oh gosh. There were people coughing in the restaurant and I just glared daggers at everybody. And as I was on campus meeting with people, trying to plan my sabbatical for 2 years in the future, MU shuts down classes. I start driving back the very next day. Cotty shuts down classes. I drive home. The NBA basically gives up their season. All the major sports give their seasons. The president's on basically limiting flights. And I'm like, here it comes. And that's probably what happened. And it probably was a different sequence of events for all of you. So here's an example for me. You don't need to write this down. My informant was a classmate. So when September 11th happened, I'm going to be completely honest with you. So if you don't know the full sequence of events, basically, the first thing that happened was that a plane hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center. And at the time, they didn't know this was part of a coordinated attack. It looked like at the time that it was a random accident. So I'm 18 years old. I thought I was better than everybody else. And I thought I was too smart to be going in a place like FSU. I was generally not a pleasant person to be around. I learned quick. And I remember seeing this on the TV and y'all, I didn't realize what was going on at the time. I thought it was a pilot error. I am legitimately telling you how horrible I used to be. I remember rolling my eyes walking past the news in my dorm and going, idiots. Yeah, I was bad. I have learned humility since. So I had a Psych of Women class in the morning. And then I had back-to-back classes with social psych. So class broke. All of this is going on while I'm in class. And folks, we didn't have the internet capabilities like you do now. Nobody really had a cell phone at that point. And if it did, it didn't have the capabilities that it does now. So when I get done with class and the social psych class is coming in, a student sits next to me and I think her name was Jenny. We talked with each other from time to time and she goes, did you hear about what happened to the World Trade Center? And I go, yeah, a plane hit it. And she goes, that's not all. So she is telling me all of this and it sounds fake. So we're in between Psych of Women at Social Psych in the Longmire building at FSU in freshman year. Everybody's talking, classes were canceled. My initial emotional state was skepticism, looking at the emotional state of others. My psychology professor, Dr. Plant, comes in and is in tears. And that's when I realized this is probably serious. And then the consequences were, I cried all day long watching the footage with my roommate. And then I became a nicer person and felt awful and hopefully became a little less elitist over the long term. We're out of time, but you can talk with me after class. Okay, so we'll talk some more about flashbulb memories and eyewitness testimony next time. Tests, yes. Thank you. Sorry for keeping you. Okay, so remember, if you see something in pink, I was trying to ease up on you. And again, it's your overall grade in the grade book. Do not panic. Everybody's doing fine. I know you don't believe me, but you should. And you're gonna meet with me tomorrow, yes? Yes. Okay. Okay. It's not. Okay. So you don't need to see me.
Because I can tell you exactly what happened.
You got a little confused? It happened.
That and I had so much going on with all my other classes.
I
that-
don't have it yet. It's in the file. I am waiting.
I will patiently wait.
I appreciate that, Haley.
What if I run away? What's the consequences?
Not doing it.
Has like tag.
There are consequences I'm willing to see.
You're welcome. Sarah. Oh, you're fine. Emanuela. Y'all did a great job. Everybody did generally, everybody did well. Yeah.
Oh, what is it like if? Because my memory of COVID was the day before